The woman with the issue of blood. A story some of you may know, some story some of you may not. Very interesting story. So let's break it down. Jesus was preaching, teaching, speaking to the people. Sounds like I was about to start rapping, right? But at this time, a Jewish leader came and knelt before him and said, "Teacher, my daughter is sick and she's dying. Please come and heal her." So Jesus starts to go with him. And as he's going, they're going through this densely populated area. Crowd is following Jesus because clearly he was in the middle of teaching. And then he just got up to go and help this leader of the synagogue, a man by the name of Jairus. Now, nobody would have said anything because the leaders of the synagogue were highly respected people, pillars of the community, high social standing. Defy them would have been like to go against a highly respected judge. They had a lot of legal sway. Anyway, so everyone tried to follow. People were pushing, squeezing, trying to get go with Jesus and get to where Jesus was going. In the midst of all of this, there is a woman, and the Bible says she has suffered for 12 years with an issue of blood. So basically, she has had her cycle going for 12 months, 12 years continuously, 12 years. It says she has spent everything she owned, but yet found no cure. She had spent everything she owned and everything she had on physicians and in an attempt to find a cure, but she had nothing. No better. She was no better. She had no solution, no cure. So she proceeds to touch. She says to herself, if I can just touch his robe, I know I will be healed. So she pushes through the crowd, squeezes in, forcing. Now, if you imagine how densely populated this crowd is, because everyone's trying to go with Jesus, and she's pushing, and she's trying to get as close as possible. So she would have been forcing her way through, trying to like get through there. And she reaches and she touches the hem of his garment. And instantly she is healed. And Jesus stops and turns around and says, "Who touched me?" Now everyone's looking at him crazy, like, you see all these people here forcing and pushing and trying to get. Why are you saying who touched me? Everyone's touching you. Now, one of the accounts, or a couple of the accounts in the Gospels, just say Jesus turned around and said, "Who touched me?" One, the account of Luke, provides a little bit more clarity. Jesus said, "Who deliberately touched me?" Who touched me with the intent of extracting healing power from me? That's a big distinction. So the Bible then says that the woman, knowing that she had been discovered, was immediately terrified and trembled. And she came out and she said, "It was me." And Jesus turned around and said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace." Now, This is where it all gets interesting. So, in first century Judea, people were still under the law of Moses. The law of Moses explicitly prohibited someone who had an issue with blood, because they would have been deemed ritually unclean, to be out in public like that, especially in a crowded place. Usually they would have been. So let's really put her situation into context. You're unclean until your issue of blood is stopped. Hers has been going on for 12 years. So that means for 12 years, she would have been both socially ostracized, because she can't enter the temple and worship. She can't hug her children because they would become defiled. She can't be intimate with her husband because he would be defiled, and they would both be extra ostracized, cut off from the community for breaking Levitical law. She can't be in the same part of the house as them for fear of sitting or touching an object that they would then touch and then rendering them unclean. So she would have been in a separate dwelling. Now, it says she spent everything she had. So the likelihood is she wasn't even with her husband or with her children anymore. She would have been on the fringes of the community, pushed out, all by herself, living in isolation. She couldn't go to any religious festivals. She couldn't partake in the Passover. She couldn't partake in the Festival of Shelters. She couldn't partake in the new moon celebrations. Everything, every celebration that the Jewish community had, every time that people got together, every time that people had communal worship, she couldn't be present. She would have been living in physical isolation on the fringes of the community. She would have had to suffer continuous embarrassment because she would have to declare to people that she was unclean, so that they wouldn't touch her or her garments. She would have been a social pariah. Nobody interested in touching her in any kind of friendly way. No hugs, no kisses to greet friends, nothing. Just outside, as though she wasn't part of the Jewish community. So knowing all of this, knowing the penalty for breaking the Levitical law, because again, having been ostracized for 12 years, having been physically lonely for 12 years, having had potentially no one to talk to for 12 years, having spent everything she had, she decided she would risk it all. The last thing that she had, her life, she would risk it to go and touch the hem of Jesus' garment. Now, you could say that she had well, what's the worst that can happen attitude. But it's more than likely she had I know that this will set me free kind of mentality. So if that had the power to set her free, she made the decision that she would go out there and she would risk it all for freedom. From freedom from her affliction, from freedom from her social exclusion, from freedom from her physical pain, weakness, financial freedom, because everything she had, she pours into trying to be well. Now, the best thing, the amazing thing with this is her cure was free. The cure, the thing that set her free, that broke all the chains, was absolutely free. Her freedom was free. It didn't cost her a thing. But here's where it gets interesting. Because now she pushed through this crowd. She touched Jesus. Jesus said, "Who deliberately touched me to extract healing power from me?" Now, if she had turned around and just slinked away in the crowd, no one would know. She could disappear and she could walk. But in that moment, she had to make a choice. Now, remember, she's pushing up against all these people. Therefore, she has made potentially dozens, if not maybe 100 people unclean, because it's like a chain of it's a chain effect, isn't it? If I'm unclean and I touch you, and you touch someone else, and they touch someone else, suddenly all these people are becoming unclean. Technically, by the law of Moses, if she touched Jesus, she's made Jesus, his garment, unclean. But that's not possible. You can't touch the great physician and make him unclean. You can't touch the fulfillment of the law and make him unclean. So she stands there knowing that she risks everything in that moment. In that moment, she could be killed. In that moment, the rabbis could say she deliberately contaminated and made everyone unclean. And that was enough to justify the death penalty. She could have been stoned to death right there. But then she has the boldness. Yes, she was afraid. Yes, her fear would have been at 10,000. Her heart would have been pumping. The blood would have been rushing. She would have been so afraid. But I'm sure in her mind, she was already resolute that I was willing to risk it all for this. And now that I've been discovered, I might as well say. So she proceeds to tell them, "Jesus, it was me. Teacher, it was me. I touched you because I had suffered with an issue for 12 years. I had spent everything that I have. I'm alone." What she was telling them in that moment was, "I'm alone. I'm lonely. I'm financially broken. I am desperate. Everything has been taken away from me by this illness. It has left me in isolation. Nobody talks to me. Nobody comes to see me. Nobody greets me. Nobody says hello to me. Everybody avoids me. My friends are gone. My family are gone. I'm all alone. I couldn't take it anymore. This was the last thing I had. You were my last hope. If this didn't work, it was the end for me. I can't take it anymore." Now, I know we've all felt something, but I don't know if any of us have suffered to the extent that this woman has suffered. But in her moment, she told everything. And what Jesus does is he completes the healing. Because the healing was just not physical. The healing was complete and total restoration. Now, if she had slunk away into the crowd and said, I'm not going to say a thing, she would go back to her community and she would fulfill the purity rites and she would step back into the community. But there'll be a ton of questions to answer. How did you get well? You've spent everything you had. Where did you find the money to get well? How were you healed? Where did you go? Who took you? Why is that person not um, why is that person not fulfilling the purification rites? So many questions. So her best bet was to tell the truth and to speak up. But what Jesus completely restores her by saying, your faith has healed you. Go in peace. What Jesus is saying there is that you have been made whole, you have been made clean. Go back to where you came from. You no longer have to be isolated. You no longer have to be separated. You can go back into worship. You can go back into community. You can go back amongst the people. You can go back and have friendships. You can go back and be remarried. You can go back and you can have children. Everything that had been stripped away from her suddenly restored in an instant. So for us who are going through difficult things, because I know I've been through some stuff. I have been through some stuff. I got stories to tell. But one thing I know is that everything has ever been taken away from me, I got restored. And in just one touch, with just one word, He's healing, can pour all over me and set me free, restoring everything that I've ever lost. All I want to do is be part of His community. All I want to do is have Him say, welcome home. So if you're going through some stuff right now, if you feel isolated, if you are physically unwell, if you were socially excluded, if you have lost all hope, remember this woman's story, because there is hope in Jesus. All you have to do is reach out and touch Him. What will you do today?